Trump don't give up. Trump sent off 50 missiles to Syria while he was in his bathroom.
We've never been here before. Divides. There's no way around that. All division divides.
It is a sad, sad day for America. It is hard to find the words to describe the shock and the horror that people are feeling right now. The act has just deepened an already huge divide in the United States of America.
Earlier this year, during an interview at the club on Shay Shay, Katt Williams remarked that chaos would reign this year. Since then, we've seen numerous scandals, notably the law enforcement raids on Diddy's residences.
A story we're following, and of course we're trying to gather more and more information about it here on Live Now from Fox, as Diddy's home in Los Angeles has been raided by Homeland Security. Of course,
Many thought that was the extent of it. Therefore, nothing could have prepared us for the events of yesterday, making Katt Williams' warnings seem eerily prescient. The notion that a president or presidential candidate could be targeted in such a way in 2024 is almost unthinkable, reminiscent of a time like 1962.
It is a sad, sad day for America. It is hard to find the words to describe the shock and the horror that people are feeling right now.
While in his bathroom, Trump ordered missile strikes on Syria.
Do it. Trump don't give up. Trump sent off 50 missiles to Syria while he was in his bathroom.
In his club interview, Katt Williams provided a pointed critique of the messy state of American politics, emphasizing the discouraging nature of the current main candidates from both parties. Katt identified America's two-party system as the root cause of the nation's issues.
Even in the beginning, when our Constitution was drawn up, the two parties was not what they had in mind.
The concept that Americans are limited to just two viable political choices contradicts the vision of the Founding Fathers. This anomaly has become the norm, allegedly due to a shadowy group intent on maintaining control, the big guys.
Some of us are against the Illuminati, and we are against the Illuminati at our own detriment.
Regardless of the truth behind this, you can't deny the accuracy of Katt's predictions so far. For those unfamiliar with the big guys, here's a brief overview. One of the earliest mentions of the big guys refers to the Bavarian Big Guys, a secret society active for about a decade from 1776 to 1785. This group was founded by Adam Weishaupt, a German law professor who strongly believed in Enlightenment ideals, which promoted reason, logic, and education. They aimed to spread these ideals among the Bavarian executives. Weishaupt's goal was to educate Big Guys members in reason, philanthropy, and other secular values to influence political decisions once they gained power. This approach naturally led to the suspicion many people harbor towards them. To complicate matters, the historical Big Guys had two distinct aspects: their strange rituals and their Enlightenment ideals. Reportedly, the Big Guys engaged in many peculiar practices. They used symbols like the owl, adopted pseudonyms to protect their identities, and had a complex hierarchy including levels like novice, minerval, and illuminated minerval.
Heard of the Illuminati? Chances are you've probably seen one of the symbols associated with them: pentagrams, goats, even the all-seeing eye that's found on US.
Initially, Big Guys members were so wary that they didn't trust anyone over 30, considering them too inflexible. While some accounts of their rituals are difficult to verify, it is known that members used espionage-like methods to keep each other's identities secret. Amid these odd rituals, they also promoted Enlightenment ideals, such as rational thinking and self-governance. They were staunchly anti-clerical and anti-royal, constantly trying to infiltrate and disrupt powerful institutions like the monarchy and the church. Historians believe the Big Guys had limited success in gaining influence. But there are those who think the Big Guys managed to take control of the world and continue to do so today. If an all-powerful group truly ruled the world, we likely wouldn't be aware of it, would we? Thus, Katt Williams' perspective becomes more understandable. Additionally, it's challenging to separate the success of the Big Guys from that of the Freemasons, a group they infiltrated and led. It's equally difficult to distinguish the actual influence of the Big Guys from the perceived influence. Perhaps that's part of their strategy. At the very least, we know the Big Guys included influential members, such as various dukes and leaders of the time. The belief in big guy's influence largely depends on personal perspective. As noted earlier, the group was officially banned after a decade, and according to some historians, attempts to revive them have mostly been money-making schemes. In 1785, the Duke of Bavaria, Karl Theodor, outlawed all secret societies, including the big guys, imposing severe penalties for anyone who joined them. Most of the group's secrets were revealed or published, and according to many historians, the big guys ceased to exist. However, this did not mark the end of tales about the group. Once the big guys was officially disbanded, their legend only grew. Documents discovered in the homes of high-ranking big guys members, such as a man named Xavier von Zurich, confirmed some of the most eerie theories about the group. These documents spoke of their ambitions for world domination and their cult-like practices. Whether these documents exaggerated the truth or not is irrelevant. The moment the big guys was disbanded, these revelations fueled numerous conspiracy theories about the group. Some of the most well-known theories claim that the big guys infiltrated the Freemasons to such an extent that they became leaders in numerous Freemason lodges. But this was not the only conspiracy. In 1797, another theory suggested that secret societies, including the big guys, orchestrated the French Revolution. Imagine the level of influence that would imply if it were true. This context helps explain why Katt Williams discusses their impact on American life and politics. It's important to note that suspicion of the big guys didn't start with Katt Williams. Some of the founding fathers themselves fueled interest in the big guys in the United States. In 1798, George Washington wrote a letter addressing the big guys' threat. Although he believed the threat had been averted, his mention of them only bolstered the big guys' myth. When the first president of the country highlights something so prominently, it's easy to see why people would pay attention. Perhaps Washington knew something others didn't. In fact, during the subsequent panic induced by anti-big guys books and sermons, Thomas Jefferson was even accused of being a member. Although these early big guys panics eventually subsided, they lent a degree of legitimacy to the group that made later conspiracy theories seem more plausible. While conspiracy theories have always found an audience in the United States, the big guys were, for centuries, less feared than the Freemasons. For instance, the 1828 Anti-Masonic Party was founded on opposition to the Freemasons. Although the party eventually faded, Freemasons continued to be a source of paranoia in America. Given that the big guys recruited many members in Europe through Freemason lodges, it didn't take much for people to fear both groups and even confuse one for the other. This Freemason paranoia can partly explain contemporary conspiracy theories about the big guys. Many founding fathers were Freemasons, and some key American symbols may have Freemason origins. For example, there's a compelling argument that the floating eye on the dollar bill, the Eye of Providence above a pyramid, comes from Freemasonry. Understanding this early Freemason paranoia helps us grasp the modern-day conspiracy theories about the big guys. The big guys never truly vanished from popular culture. It always simmered in the background. But in the mid-1970s, the big guys saw a resurgence thanks to a literary trilogy that reshaped their image into something simultaneously ominous and absurd. The Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Shay and Robert Anton Wilson portrayed the big guys with a mix of immense power and irony. From that point, the big guys began to gain more prominence in popular culture, evident in works like Dan Brown's hugely successful novel Angels and Demons, as well as various subcultures. This is why the group is often intertwined with myths about Satanism and aliens, for instance. However, perhaps the most prominent area where many people, including Katt Williams, link the big guys is the entertainment industry. Even though most celebrities have denied these allegations, conspiracy theorists believe this is exactly what a member of the big guys would say. More broadly, the rumors about the big guys and celebrities highlight their role in our culture. It suggests that figures like Jay-Z and Beyonce seem to exist in a different world from the rest of us, having secret lives and access that appears almost otherworldly.
Jay-Z really in the Illuminati? Is Donald Trump? Is Katy Perry?
Among these celebrities are Kid Rock, 50 Cent, Kid Cudi, Nicki Minaj, Meek Mill, and Soulja Boy. Ari Spear, Plies, and John Rich of Big and Rich, along with Kid Rock, who strongly supports the presidential candidate, went on a profanity-laden tirade, defending anyone who challenges his self-proclaimed best friend. On the other hand, 50 Cent approached the situation humorously. He took to Twitter, sharing a clip of his song "Many Men Wish Death," alongside a photo of a defiant Trump being escorted away from a rally by the Secret Service. He followed this with an image from his Get Rich or Die Tryin' album, but with Trump's head superimposed on his body, captioned, "Trump gets shot." Let's take a trip down memory lane. At the national conventions of the two main parties, you'll hear speakers invoke the names of the founding fathers to justify the existence and perceived necessity of the two-party system.
Even in the beginning when our Constitution was drawn up, the two parties was not what they had.
Politicians often criticize one founding father while praising another, seemingly unaware of the full historical context. For example, Republicans might criticize Alexander Hamilton and his doctrine of implied constitutional powers while praising James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. Yet, Hamilton was the founder of the Federalist Party, the precursor to the modern Republican Party. Conversely, Democrats might criticize Madison without fully understanding his legacy. Many Americans will tell you that a two-party system is essential, that having 3 or more parties is impossible, and having only one is unthinkable. But is this really true? If it were, would one founding father describe political parties as a necessary evil? George Washington ran unopposed in the first 2 presidential elections. But since 1796, the first election with 2 competing candidates, Jefferson and John Adams, political parties have always sought to destroy each other. From the beginning, American presidential elections have been fierce, not just in the 21st century. Originally, the Constitution did not account for political parties. It's not that the Founding Fathers didn't consider them, but the term party was anathema to them. They envisioned a presidential election where the top vote-getter would be president and the runner-up would be vice president. In this setup, why would parties be necessary? The founders viewed opposition to the new nation's political leadership as treason. Many of their families, including George Washington's, had fled from the brutal partisan warfare of the English Civil Wars of the 1640s, which ended with the beheading of King Charles I. In the ensuing political strife, the austere, budget-cutting opponents of the free-spending King Charles II were labeled Whigs, a derogatory Scottish term for curdled milk. In return, the Whigs hurled back the term Tory, an Irish word for highway robber, at defenders of the king's lavish lifestyle. These negative labels were embraced as badges of honor and became the first party identifiers. But it didn't stop there. During the civil conflict of the American Revolution, the 2 opposing factions adopted those same old English labels. The colonists advocating for American independence were called Whigs, while the pro-England loyalists, the original Tea Party, were labeled Tories. For this emerging Whig party, the Tories were the internal enemies that needed to be purged and cast out. Having experienced and participated in the infighting, brought on by the formation of political factions, you can understand why the Founding Fathers developed a deep aversion to political parties. The fear that post-revolutionary party politics might devolve into civil warfare again was so profound that the Founding Fathers understandably shunned the very notion of parties. For instance, the Scottish philosopher David Hume, upon learning that his old friend Benjamin Franklin was deeply involved in American political intrigues, was horrified and remarked, "I am surprised to learn our friend Dr. Franklin is a man of faction. Faction, above all, is a dangerous thing, eh?" Even when the most challenging political questions of a new nation were hammered out in secret during the Constitutional Convention of 1787, there was no provision for a 2-party system. opposition to the new Constitution, while strong in many states, was expected to be short-lived and disorganized. However, from France during this period of reform, Thomas Jefferson objected to the absence of any formal provision for a two-party system. "Men are naturally divided into two parties," he wrote. "Those who fear and distrust the people and wish to draw all power from them into the hands of the higher classes, and those who identify themselves with the people, have confidence in them, cherish, and consider them as the most honest and safe, although not the most wise, depository of the public interests." Clearly, this sentiment sowed the seeds for political parties in America. But while it was evident that George Washington and many other founding fathers despised the idea of political factions, the first president was also astute enough to realize that unless he included Jefferson in his administration, Jefferson would organize anti-federal opposition into a political party, potentially crippling the nascent nation before it could establish itself. Washington played it wisely, as far as he could. The uneasy alliance of the first American political system lasted less than 2 years. Within Washington's cabinet lay the seeds of two very different political parties. Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton represented the prosperous seaport towns of the North, the banking and commercial interests, and the creditors. In contrast, Jefferson, burdened with debts himself, represented the South and the West, the farmers, the laborers, and other debtors. To Jefferson, the Federalists were intolerably aristocratic and monarchist, while to Hamilton, the Jeffersonians were French-style radicals who needed to be restrained. Initially, James Madison, who is generally regarded as the father of the Constitution and a major author of the Federalist Papers, supported Hamilton. However, Hamilton's pro-business and pro-banking policies, along with his close ties with land speculators who were swindling veterans out of their bounty lands, quickly drove Madison into Jefferson's camp. By the end of the First Congress in the spring of 1791, Jefferson and Madison decided to launch a political party to oppose Hamilton, as well as his and President Washington's fiscal policies. This marked the figurative firing of the first shots. They arranged for the Princeton-educated journalist Philip Freneau to establish the National Gazette, a Philadelphia-based weekly, to counter Hamilton's Gazette of the United States, which was backed by the Federalists. They followed up this first step by creating Democratic-Republican clubs across America, thus forming the first distinct political parties in the United States. Concerned about the potential fallout, Washington decided to stay on for a second term to prevent his subordinates from, as he feared, dividing the nation into two opposing factions. To him, political parties signaled disunion. Eventually, both Jefferson and Hamilton resigned from Washington's cabinet to lead their respective parties' attacks on each other, using anonymous surrogates to write vitriolic columns for their thrice-weekly party newspapers. To suppress the rise of a second party, Washington's successor, Federalist John Adams, signed the Alien and Sedition Acts into law, making it a federal crime to criticize the president or his administration's policies. Supreme Court justices became circuit-riding inquisitors, trying, fining, and imprisoning some 25 editors and printers who supported the Jeffersonian Party. Religious groups endorsed their preferred candidates and condemned their opponents. During the 1804 campaign, the Congregational Clergy of New England united against candidate Jefferson. In sermons reprinted in Federalist newspapers, they branded him an atheist at a time when 4 out of 5 American newspapers were Federalist. When Jefferson became president, he introduced what later became known as the spoils system. In his bid for even-handedness, he dismantled the Federalist Party. Jefferson fired half of all federal office holders, retaining Federalists only in low-level clerical, postal, and customs service jobs. By excluding Federalists from the federal payroll and from political and administrative experience, Jefferson effectively deprived them of any chance to rebuild a power base. Consequently, the Federalists never won another election in America. Jefferson's Democratic Republicans evolved into Andrew Jackson's Democrats, who held power, except for a single term, for 60 years. Then came Abraham Lincoln's turn. His newly formed Republicans were ushered into the White House by the nearly catastrophic Civil War. Opposing the governing party became treasonous once again. Lincoln's critics were rounded up and incarcerated, and no Democrat would be elected president for another generation. The GOP of Abraham Lincoln dominated with only 2 brief interruptions for nearly 80 years until Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Throughout much of America's history, there has effectively been only one dominant national political party thriving at any given time in the winner-takes-all system. Even though the pendulum swings may be shorter these days, neither party seems willing to relinquish the possibility of completely vanquishing the other. So, it would seem that Katt Williams was correct. What happened at the presidential rally is just a symptom of a long-standing political issue that has burdened America for so long. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for our next video.